This story is completely fictional. All characters, companies, incidents, government agency actions, investigation details, and international relations developments are products of the author's imagination and have no connection whatsoever to real persons, organizations, nations, or events. Please enjoy it as a satirical and cautionary tale inspired by real-world economic security policies and export control systems. The Fall of the Hospitality Nation, the Dual-Use Pitfall, Prologue, Two Worlds in the Mad Alchemy. Once upon a time, in a certain country, there were two ways of creating wealth. One was the world of multiplicative magic. Craftsmen, covered in oil and grime, wielded materials and machines with ingenuity. They possessed muddy magic wands, such as insulating films, silicon wafers, high-purity chemicals, and specialized valves. Though they looked plain and dirty, one wave of these wands could turn a single material into products worth 100 or 1,000 times more. These wands brought foreign currency to the nation and made people's lives richer and stronger. The other was the world of additive labor. It involved greeting guests with smiles, bowing politely, and serving them with heartfelt care. It was like blowing beautiful iridescent soap bubbles. Everyone felt happy, but the number of bubbles one person could produce in a day was limited. No matter how hard they tried, they could never turn one into 1,000. In the year 202X, this country chose to break its own magic wands and have everyone blow soap bubbles instead. What supported this shift was modern alchemy, fueled by Mepho bills, Kuroda's bazooka, and cryptocurrency. Chapter 1, The Beginning of the Pitfall. Spring, 2027. A conference room in Kasamgaiski. Everything started here. The Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, MITI, and the Public Security Intelligence Agency formed a joint dual-use special investigation task force, and top officials ordered them to strictly apply the risk of potential military diversion. If we make a mistake on national security, our careers are over. Even if companies go bankrupt, it's not our responsibility. The shovel of self-preservation dug the pit deeper and wider. The first to fall was an executive from Company A major insulating film manufacturer. In an internal compliance meeting, he reviewed the export application, intended use, insulating material for server package substrates. Final end user, civilian server companies only. No defense-related entities on the customer list. It seemed perfect. But in the interrogation room of the task force, the prosecutor pointed to a single line on the document. This phrase for servers is ambiguous. Although not on the list control, under catch-all controls it is deemed potentially transferable to high-density electronic components in military radar or missile guidance systems. Red flag. Exporting country is adjacent to a specified nation. The executive shouted, "We already consulted MITI in advance. There is no risk of diversion." But the Public Security Agency dismissed him. "The final judgment is ours." He was detained. The production line was immediately halted, causing panic among global chipmakers. During detention, the executive's health deteriorated, but the investigation continued. Next to fall was the president of Company B, a high-purity chemical manufacturer. He attempted to export high-purity hydrofluoric acid, HF, labeled for semiconductor cleaning, but was arrested on the grounds that it falls under list control as a chemical weapons precursor and can be diverted to military sensors and SAW filter manufacturing processes. His desperate plea, MITI's consultation desk said it was okay, was ignored. A production suspension order was issued, halting semiconductor cleaning processes worldwide and delaying chip production globally. A technician at the company muttered, "We were too complacent. We underestimated the regulations." Then came the greatest tragedy, Japan's treasure, Shinetsu Chemical. Exports of silicon wafers, photoresists, and photomask blanks, core materials with dominant global market share, were targeted with the reasoning, under catch-all controls, these are judged to be base materials for radiation-resistant military chips and missile guidance systems. The headquarters was surrounded, and the chairman along with 10 key technical executives were arrested in a sweeping raid. Construction of the new Gunma factory was halted. Supply completely stopped, causing chain reaction shutdowns at global fabs operated by TSMC, Samsung, Intel, and others. The chain did not stop. Mitutoyo, Kins, Murata Manufacturing, Hardlock Industry. As executives from renowned companies were taken away one after another, engineers on the factory floor realized, there's no point risking arrest to continue precision technology, magic, hospitality, soap bubbles, is safer. They left the factories and moved to jobs as hotel front desk staff, tour guides, caregivers, and massage therapists. Their salaries were halved, but at least they no longer feared a knock on the door at dawn. Chapter 2, Alchemy and Smile Credit. To support a nation that can no longer make things, the government launched a desperate measure, the Hospitality Nation Declaration. No need for resources or factories. The Japanese heart is the strongest export resource. The government issued a cryptocurrency called Smile Credit, SC, backed by the value of service industry work. This was effectively a modern, MIFO bill, hidden off-balance sheet debt issued in massive quantities to pay salaries to former engineers. To prevent the collapse of SC, the central bank's Kronos was activated. Kronos, modeled after the old Kuroda bazooka, instantly printed fiat currency to buy any SC that appeared on the market. Through infinite easing, SC prices were artificially propped up. The protagonist, Keikaru, a former engineer, now worked as a hotel bellboy. Every depot to a guest turned a cha-ching, as SC was credited to his smartphone wallet. Amazing, my assets are growing more than in the factory days. The numbers on the screen kept rising. The city overflowed with inbound tourists, and at first glance, it looked prosperous. Keikaru and the others didn't realize they were living inside soap bubbles. Chapter 3, The Verdict from the Netherlands. But the real economy was screaming. China announced retaliatory measures. If Japan arrests its own citizens and halts exports, we will restrict imports for our own national security. Imports of rare earths, gallium, germanium, and high-purity hydrofluoric acid were effectively stopped. NVIDIA GPU prices soared uncontrollably, and AI development stalled. Amid this, Japan's Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry traveled to the Netherlands. His counterpart was a trade representative and executive from a semiconductor company in the ASML lineage, Mr. Van der Koop. The minister proposed payment and smile credit. Van der Koop coldly replied, "You want to buy our lithography machines with your cryptocurrency, SC? Absurd." He began lecturing the minister on history. In the 17th century, we Dutch danced to the tulip bubble with no substance and nearly perished. In the 20th century, we drowned in natural gas, windfall profits and suffered the Dutch disease that decayed our manufacturing. We learned our lesson. What saves a nation is not flashy flowers, tulips, or gushing resources, gas. It's unique, irreplaceable technology, ASML. The only magic wand the world bows down to want. Van der Koop pointed to the Japanese report on the table. Your country is running in the opposite direction. You learned nothing from the tragedy of the Okawara Kakoki incident, and strangled Shinetsu Chemical, the goose that lays golden eggs. You treat engineers like criminals, turn factories into hotels, and sell hospitality as the modern tulip. Sorry, but our equipment cannot be bought with your smiles. We accept only tangible value. Chapter 4, The day even bread could not be bought. Summer arrived. Whether due to a mutant strain or global recession, tourists suddenly vanished. The moment the only source of foreign currency, inbound tourism, was cut off, the Kronos reached its limit in supporting SC. The great collapse of Smile Credit, SC, began. Keikaru's smartphone displayed the despairing figure, 1 SC equals 0.00001 yen. He was laid off from the hotel and joined the long line at the bakery, clutching an empty wallet. "Please give me one bread." Payment in SC. The shopkeeper shook his head wearily. "Sorry, kid, that coin won't buy even a spoonful of flour. If you want bread, bring yen, dollars, or anything actually useful. A long line stretched before Kakeru. Bread now cost 1,000 yen per piece, it used to be 100 yen. Former engineers stood stunned, remembering that if they still had the magic wands they once created, they could have bought mountains of bread. Chapter 5. Apology and Misnaming. As the situation spiraled out of control, the government was forced to admit fault. It emerged that Company A's document ambiguity was fabricated by prosecutors after the fact, and Company B's president had died from worsening cancer during prolonged detention. This was a repeat of the tragedy in the Okawara Kakohi case, where advisor Aizawa died in custody. A press conference apology was held by the Deputy Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police and the Public Security Bureau Chief. However, their indifference to the field was exposed once again. The Deputy Commissioner mispronounced the name of Company B's deceased president as Yamamoto-sama. The Public Security Chief misnamed Shinetsu Chemical as Shinetsu Chemical Machinery Industry. This was exactly the same blunder as the 2025 Okawara apology, where police mistakenly said Yamamoto-sama, and Okawara Kakohi Kojo. Watching on TV, Kakeru let out a dry laugh. Those guys never cared what we were making until the very end. Epilogue. A muddy restart. Kakeru headed to an abandoned industrial park. There stood his stubborn father's small factory, Tetsuo. Tetsuo had evaded the dual-use regulatory net, running an outdated diesel generator and silently producing specialized screws. A Dutch buyer bowed deeply in front of the factory. "We need your factory's screws. We will pay in food and energy, not SC." Only Tetsuo's muddy magic wand held value that could be exchanged for bread. Tetsuo said to Kakeru, "See, additive labor, services cannot feed a nation. We must reclaim multiplicative power, technology." Kakeru threw his useless smartphone into the stove. He shed the luxury hotel uniform and put on oil-stained work clothes. Cold rain fell outside. All the iridescent soap bubbles were washed away by the rain, but smoke rose thinly yet powerfully from the factory chimney into the sky. Appendix. Reference materials on dual-use regulations. In-story document style. Excerpt from MITI internal draft proposal. Subject: Dual-use regulation amendment proposal amendment, addition of potential military diversion risk to catch-all controls. Red flag examples: defense companies in customer list, unclear end use. Basis: Wassenaar Arrangement Amendment, 2024. Purpose: strengthening national security. Risk: increased burden on companies, export stagnation. Example: corporate consultation email. Subject: export license consultation body, intended use semiconductor cleaning. No diversion risk. Reply: initial consultation suggests okay, but final judgment rests with public security authorities.
All right, today we're doing something a little different. We're not just digging into a report or an article. Nope, we're actually stepping into a story. It's a bit of a cautionary fable, really, about how the best intentions, when they get twisted up by fear and bureaucracy, can bring a whole country right to its knees. So let's get into it. So once upon a time, our story starts in a nation that had figured something out, a simple but incredibly powerful secret to its own prosperity. You see, there were two very different kinds of work, and they existed side by side, each one playing a crucial part in the country's success. And to really get why things went so wrong later, we first have to understand why things were going so right. And it all boils down to these two kinds of work. Think of them like the twin engines that were powering this whole nation's economy. Okay, so on one side, you had what the story calls multiplication magic. This is your high-tech manufacturing world. Think specialty films, silicon wafers, all those super precise instruments. This is where one innovation can scale up massively. A small team could invent something that ends up in millions of devices, literally multiplying wealth across society. Then, on the other side, you had addition work. This is the service industry, hotels, healthcare, tourism. It's incredibly important, beautiful work, but its growth is, well, it's linear. One person helps one other person. Both were important for sure, but only one of them could create that kind of explosive nationwide growth.
And this, right here, is where our story takes a really dark turn. The government, in an attempt to protect the nation, ends up setting a trap. But it's a trap that doesn't catch enemies. It catches the very people who made the country so strong, all because of one very powerful and, as it turns out, very dangerous idea.
And that idea is dual-use technology. It's actually a pretty simple concept. It just means some things can be used for two different purposes. You know, the same high-performance computer chip that powers your kid's video game console could also, theoretically, guide a missile. The advanced chemical used to make a semiconductor clean could also be a component in a weapon. And it's the fear of that second, more sinister use that lights the fuse for this whole catastrophe. This quote from a senior bureaucrat, it tells you everything you need to know. What was driving all this wasn't some grand evil plan. It was just fear. Pure, simple, career-driven fear. For these bureaucrats, a slip-up on national security meant their career was toast. But a company going bankrupt because of their actions, well, that was just someone else's problem. Suddenly, protecting their own careers became way more important than protecting the economy. So what happens? The dual-use special investigation team is created. And their mission basically is to enforce the rules with this extreme, you might even say paranoid level of caution. They weren't just looking for people who broke the rules. They were hunting for any potential, any tiny chance a rule could be broken, no matter how unlikely it was. And just like that, the trap was sprung. What came next wasn't a slow decline. Oh no, it was a shocking, rapid-fire collapse. It was like watching dominoes fall. First one, then another. And then the entire industry just came crashing down. And just look how fast it all unraveled. It starts in the spring. An executive gets arrested because the description on an export form for a server part was ambiguous. A little later, the president of a chemical company is arrested for insufficient paperwork. Then things get really crazy. The chairman and execs of Shin-Etsu Chemical, a global giant, are arrested because their silicon wafers could potentially be used in missiles. By the time summer rolls around, a massive wave of arrests has just swept through the nation's most important tech companies. And we're not talking about small-time operations here. These are the companies that form the very bedrock of global technology, the ones making the essential, high-tech, super-precise components that, frankly, the entire world depends on. And suddenly their leadership was in jail and their factories were going quiet. The chilling effect was instantaneous. The country's brightest minds, the geniuses behind all that multiplication magic, they looked at this whole situation and came to a very simple, very rational conclusion. Why would I risk my freedom for my job? Hospitality is safer. So what you saw was this tragic, massive brain drain. The nation's best and brightest engineers, the people creating all that scalable wealth, they started leaving their fields in droves. They traded their high-tech labs for hotel lobbies, their clean rooms for tour buses. They got peace of mind, sure, but the economic cost was just immense. And what was the price they paid for that peace of mind? A 50% pay cut. That's right, on average, their income was sliced in half just to make that switch from multiplication magic to addition work. But a crisis like this? It was never going to stay contained within one country's borders. That engine of multiplication magic wasn't just powering their nation. It was a critical part of the global engine. And when it sputtered and died, the whole world was about to feel the chill. See, those silicon wafers, those high-purity chemicals, they weren't just local goods. They were absolutely essential for global giants like TSMC, Samsung, and Intel. Without them, the production of the world's most advanced chips just stopped. The global AI boom that was changing everything, it ground to a halt. It was like a sudden man-made AI winter. And then, of course, came the geopolitical fallout. Other countries, especially China, saw this self-inflicted wound and took advantage. They slapped their own export controls on critical materials like rare earths. And the reason they gave? You guessed it, national security. The country was now being choked off from the very resources it would need to even think about recovering.
Now, here's where this all gets really serious. You might be thinking, okay, this is a dramatic fable, but this is why it matters so much. While the story is fictional, it is directly inspired by a real-life tragedy in Japan, the Okawara Kokoki case. In that case, company executives were arrested, accused of exporting a food drying machine that could supposedly be used for biological weapons. The company president was held for months. Another executive tragically died from cancer while in custody. And then the charges were dropped. So this story isn't just a fantasy. It's a reflection of a very real, very terrifying possibility.
So in the final act of our story, the economy is in ruins, the tech industry is a hollow shell of its former self, and the government finally admits it made a mistake. But the way they try to make things right, it just makes everything so much worse.
At long last, an official apology arrives. You can just picture it, this formal, sterile statement acknowledging the considerable distress caused to the leaders of the now-destroyed Shinetsu chemical.
But then you look closer at the details, and it's just unbelievable. In the apology, the police got the president's name wrong. They got the company's name wrong. This isn't just a typo. It's this profound, stunning sign of disrespect. It shows they didn't even care enough to get the most basic facts right about the lives and the companies they had completely shattered. And here's the kicker. This detail is also pulled directly from real life. This bungled apology in our fable is an exact mirror of the real one given in the Okawara case, where they made similar, careless mistakes. It's the final, infuriating piece of evidence that this entire crusade was defined by just absolute sloppiness and a complete lack of care. And so our story leaves us with this one lingering question. It comes from an old technician, standing in the rubble of what was once his factory, his life's work. We were just working hard. Why did we fall into a trap like this? And that's really the question at the heart of this whole fable, isn't it? How can good people, just doing their jobs, creating value for the world, end up being destroyed by the very system that was supposed to be protecting them? It's a question that's worth thinking about long after our story is over.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at a pretty extraordinary piece of source material. It's a fictional narrative, but it's framed as a serious warning.
Yeah, it's a novel called The Dual Use Trap, or
And this isn't just a story, is it? Our mission here is to unpack this scenario, this, complete breakdown of an advanced economy, and pull out the real-world insights for you.
Exactly. It's all about that tension between state security and, well, economic vitality.
Absolutely. So the novel kicks off by establishing this core idea, this framework for how the economy works. It actually splits it into two different types. The first is what it calls the economy of multiplication magic.
And multiplication magic is basically where innovation lives. It's manufacturing, it's high precision tech.
Right.
It's the idea that you can invest, say, 10 units of something, ingenuity resources, and the output multiplies into 100 or 1,000.
Like an AI chip.
Exactly. Think of a single silicon wafer design that ends up in millions of devices globally. That's real, exponential wealth creation.
And the source material argues that's the foundation of any advanced nation. But then it contrasts that with the second type.
Which it calls the economy of addition work.
Addition work.
So this is the service sector. We're talking hospitality, caregiving, tourism, all very valuable work, but it operates under a ceiling, an absolute one.
What do you mean by a ceiling?
Well, one person can only serve so many tables in a day, right? Or care for a number of patients. It scales linearly, 1-to-1. The book calls it rainbow soap bubbles.
Rainbow soap bubble.
Yeah, beautiful, essential even, but also fragile. And it just can't generate that foundational wealth that multiplication magic does.
Okay, so the central conflict is set. We're tracking how these dual-use regulations, specifically the catch-all provisions, become the trap that just dismantles that multiplication magic sector.
And the story makes it clear this isn't an accident, it's mandated. Starting around 2027 in the story, this directive comes from the top.
A directive to apply potential military diversion risk with zero tolerance.
Zero tolerance. That's the key. The motivation was bureaucratic fear, basically. Avoid a career-ending security mistake, even if it means a major corporation fails.
And that leads to this special investigation team.
Right. a joint dual-use special investigation team. You have MITIA, the Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry, partnered with the PSIA, the Public Security Intelligence Agency, and they weren't looking for a crime that had happened.
No, they were tasked with eliminating potential risk.
Aggressively eliminating it.
Let's dig into that a little. The mechanism of that potential risk.
Yeah.
How did the regulation itself open the door for this?
It was rooted in an explicit regulatory change. The main catch-all regulation was expanded.
Okay.
It was based on a 2024 revision to the Wassenaar Arrangement. And for you listening, Wassenaar is a big international export control agreement.
So what was the key change in that revision?
It introduced the phrase potential military diversion risk. Before that, the bar for stepping in was much higher. Now, just the potential for misuse was enough.
Even if the exporter had no intention of that.
Precisamente. They also added specific red flag examples, like if an export destination is near certain countries, or, and this is critical, if the final use description on the paperwork is unclear.
Which gave them the legal pretext they needed.
A razor-thin one, but
Right.
yeah, devastatingly effective.
And this is where we see the first dominoes start to fall. It starts with a company, a major producer of insulating film. An executive gets arrested.
Right, and this is the crazy part. The company had done their due diligence. They did a pre-consultation with MIDI.
But they were arrested anyway. Why?
The line they crossed was describing the export as for servers. That was it. The investigators called that ambiguous.
For servers is ambiguous.
To them, yes. They argued it could potentially be transferred. Not that it was, but that it could be.
Yeah.
Used in military radar or missile guidance systems.
So the investigation team with the security agency basically just overrode the guidance from the trade agency.
Exactly. They told the company that Media's advice was just that advice. The final criminal judgment on potential risk was theirs and theirs alone.
Wow. I can see how that would send a chill through the entire industry.
It paralyzed them. And then came B Company, a maker of high-purity chemicals.
What happened there?
The CEO was arrested. They were exporting high-purity hydrofluoric acid, HF, labeled specifically for semiconductor cleaning.
Which sounds pretty clear.
You'd think so. But the investigators used two pretexts here. First, they linked the HF to a list regulation item, a chemical weapon precursor.
Okay, that sounds serious.
And second, under catch-all, they argued it could be diverted for making military sensors, specifically something called SAW filters.
How strong was that connection really? I mean, was industrial cleaning acid really going into high-end military sensors?
The story strongly suggests it was pretextual. The connection was, technically possible, but incredibly unlikely in any real supply chain. But the legal framework allowed it.
And the result?
The CEO was detained. The factory lines stopped immediately. And the panic just ripples through global AI chip makers. You get instant cascading delays worldwide.
It really shows how fragile that multiplication magic is. A couple of arrests, and you can halt something that affects billions of people.
That's the core warning of the book. The security apparatus, meant to protect the nation, ends up destroying the very economic foundation it's supposed to be protecting.
All to eliminate a theoretical risk.
Exactly. Which brings us to the biggest hit. The moment that really breaks the global economy in the story.
The arrests at Shinetsu Chemical.
Yeah, and this wasn't just another company. This was the foundations.
Yeah.
The chairman and 10 of their top technical executives all arrested at the same time.
For exporting what?
The absolute fundamentals.
Yeah.
Silicon wafers, photoresists, and photomask blanks.
So for anyone listening, just explain why those three things are so critical.
I mean, they're the bedrock. Silicon wafers are the canvas. Photoresists are the chemical paints you use to draw circuits, and photomask blanks are the stencils.
Without them?
Without them, you don't make chips. Every major fab on the planet, TSMC, Samsung, Intel, they just stop cold.
And the narrative describes that ripple effect as catastrophic. The arrests halt their new Gunma factory, which leads to a complete halt of the entire global fab chain.
It's a regulatory decapitation of the most important sector in the world. And what follows from that is, I think, the most telling part of the whole story.
A human cost.
The human cost and the talent exodus. The arrests just keep coming. Executives from other huge precision manufacturers, Mitoyo, Keyence, Murata, Hardlock.
So that's the whole support system. Measurement tools, components, machinery.
It's the whole ecosystem. The story is showing the deliberate eradication of multiplication magic. And the engineers, they're watching their bosses get thrown in jail for just doing their jobs.
And they decide the risk is just too high.
It's an existential risk. So they leave. They transition into addition work.
Becoming hotel bellboys, tour guides, caregivers.
Yeah.
But wait, the story says their salaries were cut in half. That's a brutal pay cut.
It is, but the book frames the fear as absolute. They traded high-value, high-risk careers for freedom.
Freedom from that fear.
Freedom from the fear that some investigator will declare your product a potential military diversion risk and lock you up for months. They chose security over salary.
And that collective move, thousands of highly trained people leaving manufacturing for service jobs, that's the permanent dismantling of that capacity. The factories are still there, but the people are gone.
And you can't just get them back. Which brings us to the international blowback.
Right, the geopolitical consequences. China sees this chaos and announces retaliatory measures.
Immediately, they restrict imports of dual-use materials from the country.
Specifically targeting, what was it?
Rare earths, gallium, germanium, and high-purity HF acid. And their justification was just a perfect mirror image of the original arrests.
Let me guess. For their own security.
You got it. They basically said, if you're arresting your own citizens over security risks with these goods, then we have to restrict them for our own security too. It's this vicious self-destructive cycle.
And the economic squeeze just gets tighter and tighter. With Shin-Etsu wafers gone, the global fabs are in crisis.
Which leads to what the story calls an AI winter. NVIDIA GPU prices just skyrocket. Domestically, unemployment spikes. And this is when the engineers who switch jobs have this horrible realization.
They're now in the addition work economy.
Right. Uber Eats, convenience stores. And they realize that no matter how hard they work, there is an absolute ceiling. The economy is now dependent on tourism, on human interaction, and then a new pandemic variant hits, and that disappears too.
So the wealth is just gone.
Gone. And the service sector can't replace it? The story ends with this really shocking detail about poverty. Hotels close, unemployment benefits run out, and a loaf of bread costs $1,000.
Wow. And as this is all happening, public anger starts to turn back to the original investigation.
Yeah, people start realizing how reckless it all was.
Yeah.
Allegations start to surface.
Like with A Company.
Yeah.
The idea that the ambiguous description on the export documents might have been added after the fact by the prosecutors.
Right, to manufacture a stronger case. And then there's the human tragedy of B Company's CEO, who was detained for 4 months, and his cancer worsened. He died in custody.
And the narrative makes a direct parallel here, doesn't it, to a real-world case?
A very explicit one. The Akawara Kuki incident.
Remind us what that was.
A real case from 2020. Executives arrested for allegedly diverting a commercial spray dryer for biological weapons. The charges were eventually dropped in 2021, but one of the men, advisor Ijima, died in detention. His cancer got worse.
So the fictional story is using this real tragedy as its direct blueprint.
It's underscoring that the risk is real. The crisis gets so bad the government is forced to apologize. And the scene is it's a total fiasco.
This is when the top officials visit Shin-Etsu Chemical.
The mini-minister, the deputy superintendent general of the police, the PSIA director, and they can't even get the names right. The police official calls the CEO Mr. Yamamoto. The PSIA director calls the company Shin-Etsu Chemical Machine Industry.
Which would be embarrassing enough, but the book adds another layer.
This is the final cynical twist. It points out that those exact misnaming errors using Yamamoto-sama and Shigora Kuchikuju actually happened.
It happened in real life.
In the real-life apology for the Okawakuchi incident in June 2025, the story embeds a real, embarrassing failure of the state into its climax to prove its point.
And the conclusion is just bleak. The apology happens, but it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. The factories can't restart. The talent is gone forever. The customers have found other suppliers. The economy of multiplication magic has vanished, and all that's left are $1,000 loaves of bread.
So when we step back, what does this all mean for you listening? This story, the dual use trap, it really is a powerful illustration of how fragile a high-tech economy can be.
I think the main takeaway is that this core manufacturing capacity, the multiplication magic that generates real wealth, can be destroyed.
Yeah.
And it can be destroyed almost overnight by the aggressive, overly broad enforcement of these flexible regulations like catch-all.
And once it's gone.
Once that talent, that knowledge is gone, it is nearly impossible to get it back. It's a permanent change to a country's economic future.
It leaves us with a really profound question that goes way beyond this story and into our world right now. If the fear of an ambiguous regulatory trap, the fear you could be detained just for doing high-precision engineering, becomes the main factor in your career choice, where is the next generation of engineers going to work? And what does that mean for a nation's ability to stay sovereign, to generate wealth in a world that is just so fiercely competitive? It really makes you think about the cost of freedom versus the cost of innovation.